Hello, and welcome to your very last chapter for EDTE 1000. So it's chapter 12. We're going to be looking at teaching strategies. Let's start with a few definitions to make sure that we're all on the same page. So these two definitions are simply referring to the relationship between curriculum and teaching strategies. So what is curriculum? We talked about that in our previous chapter. Curriculum is what you are teaching, your content. Instruction is how you teach that content or how you teach your curriculum. So we're going to be looking at different teaching strategies, and as you can see, they fall on a continuum. On one end, you have those strategies that are more teacher focused, and on the other end, you have those that are more student focused. So what I'd like to point out in terms of this spectrum is that it does have a logical organization. So when you're teaching, you do need to think about where you fall on this spectrum in a comprehensive way, because before you can get your students to effectively learn from some of those more student-centered approaches, like discussion, like group projects, they really do need to have background knowledge. You need to know what it is that you're talking about. You can't have a thorough or a successful group discussion if your students don't have that sort of content knowledge. So I thought this was a relevant quote. Discussion is an exchange of knowledge. Arguments can be an exchange of ignorance. So the idea that to have a good discussion, you need to know what you're talking about. So like in this meme down here, I don't even know what we're yelling about. So you got to know what you're talking about. And this is also relevant, the idea that reading really does help. So sometimes you do need those things like lecture first to be able to move forward into some other strategies. But let's start with lecture. Lecture is the most teacher-focused of all the strategies we're going to be looking at. It is also one of the most common strategies. We're going to look at some reasons why teachers tend to choose lecture, when you should use it, and how you could use it effectively. One of the reasons that teachers seem to use lecture as a go-to approach is because it gives you a lot more control in the classroom. And like this meme over here in the corner, some of us really do like to have control so that we know things are being done our way. That's not always the best reason, though, to choose a strategy. Something else about lecture, it is the best strategy to use if you have a lot of information to cover in a very short time, because it is very effective in terms of getting a lot of information out there. And you can see from the picture down below, especially with college professors, I can relate to this. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with how much content you have to cover in 15 weeks. So I thought this led to the following question. What age of students tends to work best for lectures? What do you think? Is it elementary, middle, high school? Well, studies show that actually it does work best for older students. They are more cognitively capable of learning this way. They are in what's called the formal operational thought. They have longer attention spans. They're more capable of higher level thinking, so lecture does work better for older students. Now, these previous two reasons that you just saw also explain why there's a lot of lecture in college courses. In college courses, we're working with older students who are more cognitively capable, and we're also working with a lot of courses where there's a ton of information, and again, just 15 weeks to cover it, not a whole school year. But here's the problem. It's not easy to give a good lecture, and there are a lot of bad lecturers out there. So let's take a look at what you can do to make lectures more effective. What thoughts do you have? What comes to mind for you when you're thinking about an effective lecturer? Let's see what our textbook says, as well as some other things that I've added from other sources that I use. So how to give a successful lecture. First of all, you got to think about who your audience is. When you're thinking about your audience, what is their attention span? How long can they focus on any one thing? What are they interested in? Can you tie that into your examples and things you talk about? Their previous knowledge. So what do they come to you knowing? So that way you're not boring them by going over stuff they already know. And also what's developmentally appropriate. You don't want to be teaching over their heads.
So, as you can see, the square root of -1 is the imaginary number I.
I don't get it. Oh, now I get it.
Okay, that's an old robot chicken, but I love it. That idea of know who your audience is, so you're not going so far over their heads that their heads explode, and you're not being too easy. So know your audience. Next, focus. You need to know your subject, present it in an interesting way, and stay on topic. Give facts, not opinions. Try not to go off on tangents and storytelling that aren't really going to help you make your point and meet your learning goals. When it comes to tangents, a tangent is a long personal story that is typically not incredibly relevant or helpful. It is good to give short stories that connect to the content and help it to become more meaningful. That is different from a tangent. What else can you do? Be organized. Study after study shows that the more organized the information is when it's given to you in a lecture, the easier it is for you to remember it and recall it on test day. So take your big topic, break it down into smaller chunks, present it in a very clear framework. That's one thing that I spend a lot of time doing on my PowerPoints and then looking at it again in the fill-in notes to make sure that it's logical and that it's well structured. Next, you want to think about your visual aids. I'm a big fan, as you probably know, of visual aids and try to use a variety of them. So try to use that to keep your message clear and focused. It really helps people to understand your message when they can visualize it as well. It also helps by giving them a retrieval cue for their memory. And then we have pacing. The idea of thinking about pacing yourself and knowing when you need to speed up, when you need to slow down. I'm going to scoot myself over here so you can see this meme. This is one of the things that makes it hard with these online videos because in class, teachers need to use their eyes to watch the class to get an idea of if the students are bored, speed up, change strategies. If the students look like they're frantically trying to write notes or if they look confused, slow down, explain things again. So watch your pace. What else? To think about things like voice and bodily movement. This is another thing that is tough with this online approach because usually when I'm teaching, I like to be up and walking and moving around the classroom. I can't do that here. I have to sit here right in front of this little camera that's staring at me. Also use your voice. Change your tone, change your speed. And then finally, humor. Do what you can to embed a little bit of humor into your class. It goes a long way with making your lectures more interesting and easy to pay attention to. Moving on to a different category of teaching strategies is demonstration. When you're doing a demonstration, you model the skill that you're wanting your students to learn. They watch you, and then they imitate. Here's a perfect example of this from School of Rock.
You play the guitar?
Yeah.
Okay, come here. You ever played electric guitar?
My dad won't let me. Thinks it's a waste of time.
A waste of... Try this one. Okay. There's a guitar pick, and you pluck along with me, okay? If you can. Stay right there. Don't move. Just see if you can do what I do, okay? Just give it a try.
Okay, I love Jack Black, and those are perfect examples of him, again, modeling. The student observes and imitates. Our next category of teaching strategies is question and discussion. So this category has two headings, question and discussion. We're going to start with the question part and look at teacher questioning. So when teachers are working on using questioning as a teaching strategy, you first need to make sure that you're using the right questions. So you really need to think about and spend some time pondering, what types of questions should I ask? What is the goal of my question? Do they relate to the learning objectives? You don't want to just throw in questions willy-nilly. And you need to really, truly listen to your students' answers and respond. Studies have found that teachers are way more likely to do two bad habits, and one is they ask a question and then they answer it themselves. You see that in Ferris Bueller. He asks a question, anyone, and then he just answers it himself. The other bad habit that teachers have is when a student does respond, that the teacher just says, okay, and moves on, or good, and moves on. Those are two very bad habits. So you need to ask the right questions, wait for the students to answer. When they do respond, listen, and then give a response. Like really let them know, expand on what they said, maybe connect it to what another student has said, build on it, and really make it work and be part of the class. Oh, I love this meme over here on the side. Why do teachers ask questions if they know the answers? Well, why do we ask questions? And yeah, we do usually know the answers. The reason is questions are useful. They can generate interest in the topic. So sometimes by asking a question, especially one that relates to your personal experience, you can make the students more interested. You can help get their attention and keep their attention by questions, whether because they find it interesting or they're paying attention because they think they might get called on. You can use it to encourage them to think on their own about the content in some way. And then also to evaluate their learning. So if you pose a question and no one can answer it, that tells you that maybe you didn't teach it very well. Maybe you need to go back. All of your questions should be planned in advance. So typically what I do is I create my whole PowerPoint. Then when I think I'm done, I go back again and I ask myself, what questions should I ask? And I embed them into the PowerPoint so that way I know I can't forget them. This little clip art down below is from something called Bloom's Taxonomy. We also use this to help guide us in our questions, to look at the level of thinking involved. So for instance, you can see the very bottom is remember. So I might just say, okay, can anyone remember one of the ways to make a lecture more effective? That's the bottom level. The tip-top level is create. It's a little bit harder. It would be something like, can you create or think of something brand new that we didn't cover as a way to make a lecture more effective? Here's a table from the textbook that goes over the taxonomy of questioning, and you can see it's very similar with the level 1 being something simple like recall, all the way down to more extended higher level thinking like synthesizing the information or trying to reflect upon things. All right, so the other half of our question discussion category is discussion. The reason they link these two together is by using questioning, you're better preparing your students for discussion. So that questioning helps them learn how to respond to a question, how to ask a thoughtful question. So again, all that prepares them and makes them ready for things like discussion and debate. And starting in middle school really is where you might start to see things like debate clubs and tournaments and speech classes and all these things that can be helpful. So here's a question, speaking of questioning, what do students need to understand in order to have a good discussion in your class? What's needed? Can you think of anything? Well, here's what I came up with from the book and on my own. Discussions require a few things. One is active listening. You really need to listen to two things. What is the question being asked of you so that you can answer it appropriately? And also listen to what the other person is saying if it's a debate. Secondly, respect for other people's ideas. And again, especially in a debate. If other people are sharing their ideas, even if you disagree with them, you still need to be respectful. And then finally, not interfering while other people are talking. So when I read all of these, the very first thing that popped in my mind was this. If any of you watched the 2020 presidential debate, you probably recall that it was challenging to watch. And one of the reasons it was challenging was because of these things right here. They weren't listening to the question being asked to them and thoughtfully responding to it. They weren't listening to each other. They weren't respectful of one another. And they certainly weren't keeping quiet while the other one was talking. And all those things are necessary for a good discussion or debate. Okay, here's going to be where we hit pause. This video was created to fix an error that was in the original video, so we're going to pause here. When you pick up on part 2 for chapter 12, it will jump right into guided practice. So thank you.